Amir's on, I'm on, you're on. I think we all sound pretty solid. So
Yeah, we're all on.
Yeah, we were just talking about why we're not presently tuned into the Oscars. And Amir had a really good point about being a you said a non-zero-sum game related to art. It's not worth the time.
Yeah. I feel like the concept of non-zero-sum games, like competitions in terms of arts, is just rather nonsensical if you actually think about the whole thing. And I'm also privy to like how the process works. I have friends in the academy, and just that aspect alone, it does definitely turns me off how that system works.
That could be an entire show all to itself.
Sure.
But let me just ask, since we're kind of on this topic. Every year, I think it's the Hollywood Reporter puts out that it's like an article or like an online piece. It's sort of these confidential testimonies of people who are in the Academy who are voting body members, and they talk about how they came to their decisions or what that sausage making process was like. And there's all these horror stories like, oh, I didn't watch any of the movies, I didn't have time, so I voted for what everyone thought was cool, or my friend said to vote for this when I said not to vote for that one. Is what you're talking about at all related to that, or is it something even more sinister than that?
No, I mean that's definitely part of the issue. It's one of the big issues, I think. But ultimately, for me, it's just kind of an ethical dilemma. So, just the way that art is, it really I can't seem to understand how the process would work in terms of culling all the films that are available, and there is a process of requirements, and then being able to definitively crown a film as the film of the year. It just kind of is a silly concept. And then overall, a lot of these things don't stand the test of time either, and that's a whole nother argument. But there's that aspect about it as well.
Yeah.
All in all, the Oscars are kind of like what the three of us are doing. It's people in the industry deciding we're going to promote certain movies. We're going to make a big event out of it. It's going to help sell some things, right? It's an agreement. Same thing happens in the indie world.
For sure. I mean, it's part of the economy. It's part of economics. It's part of how you promote. It's the system of promotion and all that. What's funny about that? It's kind of like the Nobel Prize is similar, but people on the inside understand the structure of it. People on the outside don't. So people on the outside view this as some sort of definitive testimony of quality.
Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of where I have real issues with it. But again, it's nothing that I think about too much. So
well, when one of us
waste my time with.
When one of us are nominated, we'll be tuning in.
There you go. So yeah, well, we are here to talk about Man.
Did you see it?
In part. No. Yes, I watched it. Yes.
I have not.
Homework.
Well, two of us have seen it, so we could still do it.
There we go.
Before you do that, I want to do the monthly check-in on the old slow romance. Sujewa, what's going on with the movie?
Yeah, I have a brief update, then we can go into Man. So I'm working on like the 6th or the 7th draft, and things are coming together. I hope to send it out tomorrow morning and launch the fundraiser. I'm using a new company called a Fundraiser from Canada, RAZR, Fundraiser.
Sounds edgy.
They use PayPal, and it's easier because I want to shoot as soon as possible, like in late February or early March. It's a matter of getting the script to the point where the big thing that happens in the last scene or the last segment makes sense, from what we see throughout the script. And what else do we have going on? So still Amir is the first choice, and Kendra's still the first choice. By the time I get around shooting, they might be like big Hollywood stars. So I may have to miss out on that, but we'll see. Hopefully, by the time this airs, you can add a link to the movie and the fundraiser. I'll send you the link tomorrow, and you guys will know if the plans are still holding by tomorrow. Amir will get a text saying it's coming, and or the script, and I'll send the script to you also. But I decided to use a different camera, the XA50, because that uses 1-inch and it has a 1-inch sensor and the 4K, which is better tech than what we used for Werewolf. Because Werewolf was black and white, I didn't really have to worry too much about the colors. But with the 1-inch sensor and the 4K capture, I can do more with colors. And I think that's it about Slow Romance. So hopefully by this time next month when we talk, the film will be shot or very close to being shot. I hope to get it done by end of March. Also, I figured out important thing, to market it for 300 days, to reach 1,000 people a day, 300,000. That's my goal, using ads and social media. And it's affordable, it's doable. So that's a new thing I've never tried before. I think the big difference between indie films and Hollywood is Hollywood spends as much effort and money on marketing it as making it, maybe more. Maybe more. So that's why everyone knows about it. So if I can let 300,000 potential customers know, and it's easy to target them using Twitter or Facebook, ads, then I have a pretty good chance of this film becoming well known. So let's see. Fame, wealth is what we're after. Plus, prior to that, a really good movie. Art, fame, and wealth.
There you go.
Ask any questions.
Real quick, I want to ask you about this camera. So, were you able to test it out? Did you know someone who had one, or how did you decide to go with this particular camera, or did you just read about it and like the specs were all you needed to plop down the cash?
It's in the same XA family. The XA11 is what I used for the Werewolf, and it looked really good, and I was very impressed with it. That one, believe it or not, is HD only, which is old tech. Well, it's still current for some, and it's a 3/4-inch sensor, which is a small, like one of the smallest sensors. So the 1-inch sensor is what gives the depth and the details, that sort of cinematic quality. And I've always wanted to use one of those cameras, even for the Werewolf, but we didn't have the money. So the XA50 is a new one, relatively new, that came out since we shot Werewolf. So I tested it out, and the price is not that bad. It's around $2,000. I mean, for a movie for a camera that can create images that can be shown really well on the movie theater screen, that's a low price.
Cool. All right. Well,
and Amir knows a lot about tech. He shot something on like 8K or 16K, right, Amir?
I've used probably all the tech around. Yeah.
That's right. Jeez. Yeah. The new Top Gun movie that's coming out this year, was that on 8K?
I'm not sure if that's shot, but there's definitely things that are being shot in 8K right now. Yeah.
Because I thought I'd heard that when the first trailer, the teaser dropped a few months ago, that was one of the big selling points. Like, it's at 8K, and watching it, I couldn't tell, except that they had like this really crazy fisheye lens in the cockpit shots for like half of the trailer, and it got a little bit repetitive. The quality looked amazing, but I don't know.
Yeah. You probably saw it on 1080p or maybe 2K, but for people who have 8K monitors, I guess it makes a difference. But yeah, a lot of that stuff is really not consumer friendly in the US at the moment.
I can't even imagine 16K. That's got to be like holograms and shit or something. I don't know.
I mean, essentially, most of the films that we've seen in terms of 35 millimeter is all relatively within the 8K spectrum. It doesn't translate the same way from the digital to the analog, but it's similar. So it's not like we're bumping up in terms of resolution so much, but in the digital sense, it's a little different because of how just the resolution is perceived. So it's not like something that's never, like, we've never seen before. I mean, it's been 35 millimeter print is kind of like 8K when you watch an actual print of film.
And filmmakers and editors are still using the film standard from decades ago as the standard for the visual standard for movies. So even if they shoot it with great detail, they'll edit it in a way that it resembles kind of like the movies, 35 millimeter movies, like what Amir was saying. Here's a photo. Here's an image of of the female character that I was using when I was writing. Here's an image of the male character.
All right. That's your early wardrobe designs, no doubt.
That is, I'm not sure what K that is, but it's ink on paper.
Cool. Well, yeah, I guess we can talk about Man, which came out in 2018, right?
Right. Correct.
Now,
Underground Gem.
Sorry, what's that?
Underground Gem.
Yes, indeed. Now, I actually, when we spoke in November, I think was the last time that three of us were on a call, you had asked me if I'd seen Man, and I said no. And that's partially true, because as I was watching it today, I got this strong sense of deja vu. Now, I'm gonna come clean here, because something happened about 2 years ago. I think, was there a screening at Chicago Filmmakers?
Correct.
Yeah. Good memory.
David Fowley asked me about this movie, and I think he had sent me a link to it. And I'm going to confess, I watched 10 minutes of it, and I said, I just can't do it.
Right.
This is before you learned about slow cinema.
Exactly. So, and I'm telling you, it's like watching it. It's like reading a book in another language before you know that language, and then after you know that language.
Right.
Now that I'm being immersed in slow cinema, you fast forward a year later, and I've become obsessed with movies that have this particular aesthetic. And I watched it this afternoon, and I was completely blown away.
Thank you.
I'm taking copious notes, which a lot of these notes are just images and things that I'm seeing on the screen that I'm kind of writing down as mile markers, because to me they're speaking thematically. It's not like I'm describing an action scene. I'm thinking shot of the house on the hills, shot of beat up patio with green carpet being torn up, that kind of stuff. And it seems like kind of strange to write these down. I imagine going back in 2 years looking at my notes and just wondering what the hell I was thinking about at the time. But they seem very important to me watching this film. So I am glad that we were able to get you on the line here to talk about it, because I think there's a lot to dig into with Man. But I would like to start out with sorry, go ahead, Sujewa.
Quick interruption. So how do you feel about your former self who couldn't handle the movie?
I liken it to the book Trainspotting.
Okay.
When I first saw Trainspotting, the film, in 1996, I became obsessed with it. And I found out it was a book, so I went out and I got the book, not realizing that it was written in like Scottish colloquialisms, and it had, the American version of it had a glossary at the back just for all the Scottish slang. It's a dense, hard book to read if you've never read Irvine Welsh before, and it took me half a year to get past like page 6 because I just couldn't get into it. Right. And then one day I just forced myself to read the first chapter all the way through, and I got it. I got into the cadence, and then I couldn't stop buying his books because everything else just seemed really boring to me. Regular prose. So it's just another like 2001 Stargate experience. Once you break through, everything else just looks kind of mundane.
Yeah, that's one of the problems we had. I worked a little bit on the release of the movie, and I helped fundraise because I like Amir's work from way back when. A lot of film critics that are active now at whatever levels are not familiar with art movies and experimental movies. The major ones, like Matt Pollerseist and others, know about it and they write well about it. But a lot of the people on the web, a lot of critics just don't know because they're not mainstream movies that are being promoted at the crazy high level, right? So this is the problem that filmmakers run into. Anyone who's making movies in an art house style get discounted, or the people can't get into it, bad reviews, blah, blah. I mean, usually they just don't review it because they don't like it, or they can't get into it. So that's a problem hopefully we can fix in the future.
Yeah, I agree. And Amir, I'd like to formally apologize for
understandable.
Not giving the film a chance.
Definitely understandable.
Send $10,000. That'll make it. That'll make up for it.
First, I have to make $10,000.
Sounds
Then I
good.
have to use it to pay for priorities in my own life. Then make another 10 grand and send it to you.
This episode will make $10,000.
Wow! Happy day. So, Amir, let's talk about the inspiration for Man. And I have to ask, is this at all autobiographical or is it observational?
So yeah, I would say it is definitely observational, in the sense that, I mean, the location was real, and there's a lot of mirrors to reality, but the actual construct of it and thinking about it thematically is definitely as an observer, so I did take the lens from that aspect about it, even though I understand that, like, if somebody watches this, definitely will seem autobiographical. There's no way to get around that, but definitely observational, I would say.
Okay, that's a relief to me, because the man of your title, the first person character that we follow through the film, seems very sad and and very disconnected from everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was.
Go ahead. One thing that I saw about this movie, and which everyone else and maybe even Amir disagrees with, I think it's a really ideal living condition that he has. Isolated from people. He's got oranges. He's an orange tree. He's got a good job. He's got a nice house. He's got a couple of dogs. Hot girl who comes over and takes off. So and he knows how to cook, right? And he talks to his dad. So,
all right, that is another perspective, sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, to me, it always seems like that's a great life this guys have. So I'm always surprised that through the music cues, and from what I talked to Amir about and from other people about that, a lot of Americans think it's a sad movie. I don't know. Well, Amir, you were born here, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. So, and I'm an immigrant. So, I wonder if it's that, or the fact that I live in New York with another person, that the life shown in the character in the movie just seems great to me. So I watch it when I want to feel happy.
All right.
he's definitely an outlier on that.
Everyone else thinks it's a sad movie.
Well, let's go to the man himself. Amir, what do you consider this to be a sad movie? Do you consider this character to be a sad character, or is he somewhere in between?
Well, I mean, that's a hard point to make, in the sense that I set up a certain reality with the film and try to keep the polemics out of it, in terms of like the direction, like leading the audience into a specific direction is not how we approach this film. We approached it pretty much as a mirror, and a lot of how people view it is very much a projection, and that's essential to this. Now, my take on it is that it is definitely a film about isolation, and how technology is working within a certain maybe age bracket or epoch, in terms of how people relate to one another. And so it definitely comes off as in terms of melancholy. Now, going in terms of, we were talking about, like, thinking about the film, there is a concept called mono-no-aware, and it's a Japanese term. And again, if I'm going to talk about influence, I'll just do it right away. I was thinking a lot about Ozu in this film, and the concept of mono-no-aware is very important into this film. And it's basically a Japanese term about the passing of time, and kind of the sadness that comes through the passage of time as the seasons change. and it's really a flow. Like it's not something that's describable. You could say Mono Nowhere as some, and I can describe it that way, but it's more of a feeling. And that feeling is definitely part of the construction of this film. Now, this goes to two films I made at almost simultaneously, but they deal with it in two different ways. And the other film was Canyon, but shot relatively the same time. So yeah, I mean, I think that most of the people who view it have that feeling where they feel that isolation. They feel kind of yeah.
Well,
Okay.
About the passage of time being sad, I was raised Buddhist, and one of my best memories was isolated meditation and not being messed with, not having to worry about anyone else. And so maybe that's something.
Yeah, and that's important too. Yeah, I mean that, because that is also part of the film. So so your point as well, Sujewa, is like completely legit in the fact that we never set out to make that statement. It's just kind of something that's there, and you feel about it a certain way while it washes over you the way that it's supposed to work.
Yeah, you didn't want to say whether isolation was you didn't want to make a statement as to whether his life is good or bad. It just
Totally.
And people will react to it based on how they react to it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. And again, your point about this being something that people watch and project their own sentiments onto it, I think is completely valid. What I took away from it is it's a very sad movie about sad people, one of whom might have reached a breaking point by the end based on an encounter and decided to go in a different direction. So it ends on somewhat of a positive note. Right. But as for the man, absolutely, his name is Armand, I believe, right?
Armand, yeah.
Yeah. He is completely isolated, and that's established right from the get-go. We hear him, I think, before we see really a lot of the POV stuff. We see the house. He's on the phone talking with someone. It's like a credit card company. There's some kind of an issue, and he's arguing back and forth. Yeah. But we see him. He's in his house. You're right, Sujewa. He's got oranges. He's got his dogs. He's completely self-sufficient. He's an engineer or a coder, so he gets to work from home. He never leaves. Like, he's always in this one spot. Now, granted, this only takes place during the course of a day, but even when he has a date, he has this person come to his house. It's like ordering a pizza. And the
right.
And yeah, the interactions, he cares more about the dogs in his life. He shows them more affection than he does any of the people. When he's on the phone with his father and his father is begging him, like, when are you going to see you again? He says, 2 weeks, maybe a month. He's like, why so long? I mean, I don't know where the family lives, if they're in another country or if they're just across town or another state. But you get the feeling that the parents were expecting or hoping that he'd drop in more. And then in the encounter with Rachel's character, who I don't know, did she get a name in the film? I missed it.
Yes,
Daz. Okay. They have sex later on, and then afterwards, the reaction is a very isolated reaction on the part of Armand. He's cuddling with the dogs more than he's showing any kind of interest in her. So it's just this idea that also when he's talking to his father and his dad's pleading for him to come, visit, he's texting, he's swiping through pictures, on his phone. He's completely distracted. When he can't do anything, whether wait for an email or a phone call or wash dishes without like checking his phone or getting involved in something else. So it just, to me, it shows the isolation, which can start out as a good thing because people need their space. They don't necessarily have to go into the office and do a job. That's considered progress because people can work remotely. They can have more freedom. But with that freedom, Armand at least is locking himself up in a cell and not going out and engaging in the wide world. He's imprisoning himself.
Right.
And yeah, it's kind of a weird, dark message because at the end, we see him finally isolated and alone and just kind of sitting in bed for a couple of minutes before he finally just kind of turns in. And it's not clear if he's sad or if he's just kind of rebooting, like, well, tomorrow I'm going to look up one of these other girls that I'm interested in, or that I'm telling my would-be girlfriend that I'm interested in.
Well, when I rewatched it today, the beeps in the beginning of the movie with the phone calls coming in, that was annoying. I'm like, shut that phone off. Because that's how I'm in real life when I'm trying to watch a movie, right? But I'm like, oh, these are in the movie because I hadn't seen it. The phone, it took me like 20 minutes to be comfortable with the phone going off in the movie.
Right.
So in real life, that is an unconscious stress that we deal with.
Sure.
Right? Even me, I was getting upset over the phones. And the bit about talking to the dad, I thought that was funny from an immigrant parent-child dynamic, because that kind of conversation I have with my parents, and lots of second generation or 1.5 generation kids have that kind of conversation. Even if you hang out with them all the time, they're like, when are you coming again? Or like, why are
sure.
you enough?
Yeah, I mean, that's I think that's universal too. I mean, I have the same conversations with my mom, and when my dad was alive, I had the same conversations with him. So I think that touches on something that's universal, but also, as we've mentioned, people bring their own experiences to this film. So yeah, as far as technology and bringing people, ostensibly bringing people together. Like, the phone is great because it allows you to talk to your parents no matter how far away they are. But it also offers you the distractions that, you're isolated enough that you get so used to it that going outside or talking to people like your loved ones or accepting a phone call becomes too much of a chore. You almost need that resistance in your life as sort of a balance. Otherwise, you kind of start to feel that life inside is actual life, which I guess it can be, but it doesn't necessarily make for the richest experience.
Sure. Those are definitely strong thematics throughout. At that time, I was very much thinking about how technology was affecting my own life in terms of distractions and all that. And also, living in LA, there is, and it's funny. I mean, I get a lot. There has been a lot of comments I get personally about how people have had some self-actualizing moments watching this afterwards, and it kind of clicks later that somehow maybe they found a character, or the one of the characters had a negative reaction, but then realized somehow that a lot of that is reflected into their own kind of life in terms of how they're dealing with relationships and Tinder and Bumble and all that, and how that's kind of that aspect about the film reflects deeply into how they are viewing their own life, and then it kind of sheds some sort of I don't know. For some people, it had become an aha moment for them, which I found very interesting. I mean, I really like when that kind of stuff happens.
Very good. It's therapeutic.
And that is very cool. I wonder what, and I promise I'll go somewhere with this, but what has your reaction been with women who have seen the film and talked to you about it? Do they have that same kind of a reaction to it?
Yes, I think it's a very similar reaction, but it's different. It's definitely different. And it's hard for me to describe where the varying degrees of difference is, but there is definitely a difference. Yeah.
Well, at the end of the movie, I mean, there's no spoilers at this point, right, Amir? We can talk about whatever.
Yeah, I mean, the film is really about an experience, and it's definitely not about a plot. So,
right.
So I saw at the end today when towards the very end, she was talking to herself, wondering when boys become men. I think she was commenting on the relationship she was having with the main character. So I think she's, like you said, Ian, I think maybe she's on the way out. from this kind of relationship into and looking for something more serious.
And I got to ask about this. It's spoilery only that I'm going to describe an image from towards the very end of the movie. I have to wonder, is this an accident or purposely a thematic bit of like a tweak? When Daz is leaving, we see she's walking up the street and the words "stop ahead" are painted into
right.
It's a street crossing sign.
Right.
But was that about like the next step in her journey? Because what I took from that is like, all right, because we saw her kind of changing in the mirror. It was one of the rare shots where we see another character not from Armand's point of view. We're just looking at her and she's looking at herself and kind of deciding in that moment, like, I can't really do this anymore. So when I saw "stop ahead," I thought that meant, I'm going to stop treating myself like I'm just this thing on a market looking for someone. I'm going to, not spend any more time with this guy, Armand, because I don't know how long they've been together or just like hooking up or whatever, but it seems like she realized that this is really going nowhere.
Right. The framing choice was there. It's not purposeful in the fact that they're, just being honest. It's not as if we were making a character statement based on that shot. It definitely was, all the frames were thought through. So that was part of that signage in that particular shot that we found interesting to use in that time. So especially towards the end, because it is a layer, it has its own layer that those kind of symbolisms have their own layers in there,
Yeah.
Sure. I have one thing to say. After watching it for I think the fourth time today, I realized, fourth time ever, but I watched it today.
Fourth time today.
Hey, you didn't have anything else to do, my man.
No. So after that, I realized that Rachel's character is like the main character in a way, because Armand, because we see through his eyes, he becomes kind of like the part of the stage, part of the space in which this other character comes in. We get to see her face, and she performs. She does her thing. So in a way, that's like the main character, and Armand is almost like a side character, even though we're with him from beginning to the end. He's just the stage. That's what I thought. What do you think, Amir?
Well, it does take a turn, and this is really important. I mean, I think, this film doesn't exist without two people. One is Charles Borg, who was my co-writer, co-producer.
Charles.
And Rachel.
Chicago. He's in Chicago.
He's in Chicago. And of course, Rachel Shaka, who played Des, which I've worked with her before, and she's a phenomenal actress. And the only person that I thought could handle this particular film. It was very demanding in how, especially with the writing we had, and how she would have to take the performance and kind of and how that whole process would go down. So I do want to make sure that I shot her out, because definitely couldn't do this without either of the two.
I agree. I think she should be cast in all the movies based on this performance. This is a good thing for her to show people. This is what I can do, because I'm writing something super real, and super real dialogue, which faking super real dialogue and performing it and have it look like a documentary is very hard to do. So the whole team did a great job in this movie.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, I don't know if she was the main character, but I think she was the most important character. I do agree with Sujewa talking about how man sort of sets the stage. There's always the character in the movies that's supposed to be the audience's way into the story, and literally we are seeing everything through Armand's eyes.
Totally.
So we're watching her journey, but we're also sort of realizing what kind of a man we are watching through how he just kind of conducts himself and treats her, and ultimately treats himself. But I want to ask, the reason I asked what your reaction was from women who've seen the movie and perhaps talked to you about it is there was something I picked up on in terms of Rachel. It seems like did she say that she was 30? Is that right? I thought,
in the film.
Yeah.
So I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Because there was something about like, and this is not a judgment on anyone, but she's 30, she's still single, she's like on Tinder and Bumble, I guess, and just trying to find a connection, someone that she can, have a stable relationship with. And yet in most of her dialogue, I think this is played out wonderfully. She talks a lot of politics.
Mm-hmm.
She talks about abortion and women in the military and, vegan genes, and all these kind of like buzz topics. And it just feels like she doesn't sound like anybody, like a real human being. She feels like an authentic person, but she sounds like in her attempt to find someone, going on these apps and dating sites,
right.
You have to fill out a profile. Mm-hmm. I'm a liberal. I'm a Bernie supporter. I don't believe in, I believe in abortion. I believe in women in the military, but not in a combat role, that kind of thing. So it feels like she's gone on all these different dates and are kind of auditioning people.
Right.
And so she's gotten used to having these kind of profound conversations and speeches instead of what people, and I haven't dated in 20 years, but I just remember when you were courting someone, you'd go out and try and like feel them out and talk about like movies or what you did that day and that kind of a thing. But it seems to be all agenda driven with her. And it just, through this film, part of her journey seemed to be that she was sort of having an awakening within herself, that she's better than this guy because he doesn't care about whatever she's talking about, really. He just kind of wants to get in the sack. Mm-hmm. And at the end, she leaves, I think rightfully so. He doesn't kick her out, but he definitely ices her out, I think. Right. So I just feel like she's reevaluating who she is. And she just felt like a person who may have had a sense of herself at one point, but just doesn't anymore. And maybe that's at the end, she's going to figure things out.
Yes. And that's kind of, there's definitely archetypes being played here, and hence the title itself. And some of this kind of understanding of like those dynamics is very LA driven. And
also maybe New York and DC.
Sure, big city, yeah.
The character seems super realistic. I've met people like that. I mean, it's not once you are in several dates with someone, people relax and talk about their politics.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know how long. I don't remember. And I only saw the movie all the way through once today, so. I don't know if it was in there. Do we establish how long or how many dates they've been going out on?
It's established that they have been on a couple of these. Yeah, that they've done this a few times.
Okay.
It seems like the regular thing where they went out and then now she's coming over because it's the most convenient thing because he works from home. So yeah, I could see. I mean, this it's almost like a documentary. Was that what you were going for, Amir?
In terms of realism, yeah, I definitely, this is kind of the spectrum of, this is kind of, for me, in this particular work was the end of my digital kind of trajection, like how I saw digital cinema get birthed from the beginning and where I think the hermetic ending is for myself, like how the stripping of what cinema is and how I thought about it would be kind of encapsulated into this type of project, right? Very minimal crew, extremely intimate, that it has to feel like some lives are being lived in front of you. So yeah.
Crew of one,
Well, it was a crew. Charles also did, he crewed some of the scenes and not all of it. And there was definitely a crew of one for some scenes as well. Yeah.
And Charles walks through the guy who doesn't say hello to
him. He's in there. He makes.
I caught that today. I missed the
last going back to Rachel, she does give a wonderful performance and a very daring one. Now that term is thrown around like
Right.
crazy, especially in Hollywood, but there really is something here on a micro budget film with very specific vision for this character, asked to do bear herself emotionally and completely physically.
Right.
How long had you known Rachel, or was this like a cold audition? How did you develop that level
No,
of
no,
trust
no.
with her?
I've known Rachel for a long time. We've worked together a couple times. She did a film called Tracing the Edges with me. She was in a film called Whale, even though her part didn't. We cut those sequences out.
Will was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and that actually those scenes make an appearance in the last film I released, Rainbow Season. So she's in that as well. But I've known Rachel for over a decade, and I've always wanted to use her in a film that really kind of showcases her, just her absolute like rawness. Like it's hard to describe, but I did know right off the bat when Charles and I were working on this that this was the person I have to ask. And if she can't do it, we can't make the film. It's very simple. I mean, that's just the way it is. Once she said yes, I'm like, okay, cool. We're gonna have a film out of this. But
So, in terms of creating her character, because it feels like writing the guy parts would be pretty easy because you're a man. Did you develop her character in collaboration with her, or did you sort of write out a draft of the script, give it to her, and say, help me punch this up, help me make it authentic?
Right. So what we did with her character is that Charles and I came up with an archetype, and then I started collaborating with her in terms of how to make that feel very real to her, job wise, what she does, all the backstory involved in those two, her life and Armand's, and how they interacted. And then once we felt comfortable with that, we didn't really rehearse. I mean, we just went through some of the pre-plan in terms of how that's going to happen. And then when we were on set, she wasn't privy to the actual. So the script was written as an outline, and for those scenes, it was very question driven. So my character would have to lead both as like directing it and being in it. So I have to string the conversation along into the points that we had in the script. Now, she wasn't privy to exactly what those things were, where the points were, but she was aware of where it was going to go, how we're going to deal with it, what were the thematics, how those kind of aspects.
Sounds like a great project for a trained actor. I think she probably loved it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the realness. It's magic. I don't know. You described to me how you kind of collaborated to bring this all together. I still don't quite get it. I mean, how long did it take you to actually make the film?
Well, I mean, the shooting, the actual, in terms of principal photography for the film took about 15 to 17 days. I forgot. I mean, I really, like, after I'm done with something, I don't really think about it anymore, but I would say probably around 15 to 17 days. The parts with Rachel are practically almost in real time. So that sequence, aside from a short rehearsal we had, was filming one day, right? And then the rest of it was I treated as kind of a photo project where I would go out with a camera and shoot all the exteriors, interiors that I needed to. And then the stuff on the POV was strung together through several days. So really kind of the pre-planning took took just about as much time as the actual shoot, I think.
So,
Wow.
Amir, I have a question.
Sure.
I have a question about that might benefit other filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
From a filmmaker perspective, this is a very tough project to raise funds for, to market, to get into festivals. I mean, all around, this is like an incredibly tough project. It's because,
Sure.
you know, like what Ian did, people at festivals and critics would see the first 10 minutes. They'll be like, all right, it's a dude hanging out at someone's house.
Yeah, I mean,
But
go ahead.
this is like, you know, if some filmmaker comes to me and I'm a producer and say, let's do this, I'd be like, let's not. That sounds great, but it's not something that we can make and sell. But so why did you decide to take on such a tough task? And how has the response been from critics and festivals and the industry, quote unquote? And how do you feel about the whole thing? Are you happy you tackled this, or do you think your time would have been better spent doing something much more mainstream?
Well, I mean, this is, I think this is I don't think I've ever done a film that I didn't need to do. And that's basically been all that I've ever done. It was a film that I had been thinking about for nearly 20 years. Not just Ozu, there was a book called Studs, Terkles, Working that had a profound impact in terms of how I thought about how the description of reality is, and how things that seem so mundane. It also goes back to the Ozu thing. It seems so mundane, but it's profound. Once you concentrate on it, those things, what everybody does, what regular people do day in, day out, is profound. It's life. That's all there is. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I was trying to find a way to describe that in a visual sense, and how that would feel, how these little minutia, these tiny details add up to something that has an effect. If you are, I mean, you have to be patient, and you have to kind of, I understand that it's tough for people to get into, but I also personally, for me, I don't look at this film as an experimental film. It's only experimental in the sense that the format is experimental, but all the rest of it is not experimental. The conversations are not experimental. There's a lot of, people tell me this, there's a lot of funny aspects about it. There's funny moments about it. And there's things that are very relatable. It's just that, can you digest it for a certain amount of time to get to what the whole of it is? And it's much tougher when I have to fucking send out screeners, right? Yeah. It's different when you have to sit in a theater and you watch it. You're kind of encapsulated and you have an experience because you're stuck there. But when you're watching in a screener and a little film, whatever, it's much harder to get people to realize that there is a film in here. Just chill out for a minute and it'll happen if you do. Right.
Yes.
And theatrically, the visuals would be so large and interesting, and they're trapped in the theater.
Well, I mean, it's a momentum. It's the film is like very I say experience based, and it's just that there is a buildup that happens. There's a flow that happens, and you get into a meditative state. That's very important for this film, that it feels like a meditation at some point, where you just zone out, things are happening, and you're just kind of following along, because you can't tell where it's going to go. It's very difficult to actually tell where the direction is going to go. So if you just let that happen, feel relaxed with it, I think it works best. Of course, I can't tell people that. I can't. There's no primer to that. The only primer is that if they've seen other work I've done, and that's the context that it needs for it to be more digestible for more people.
I gotta say, just real quick, that is something that I really related to. Was watching him, the first stretch of the film before Des comes over and things quote unquote pick up and become more digestible, to use the word that you did. But just watching him wash dishes and do laundry and scroll through his phone and talk to his dad and scroll through his phone while he's doing that, I kept thinking about what I'm doing in my daily life when I'm just doing chores, because you keep cutting back to outside shots of this big, beautiful world outside Or even just the
Yeah.
detail of like the dog laying on the porch and there's like a piece of broken wood or something like that. All this details that he's just so zoned in on his own thing or his own phone, thinking there's something more interesting than that beauty that's just sitting 2 feet away if you just turn and look.
Right.
That to me, it's almost like a lesson in how to live.
Right.
And going back to the conversation with the dad, I was thinking, man, this guy's a complete asshole. This guy's on the phone, pouring his heart out to him, and he's just like checking Tinder or whatever he's doing. But then I thought, I've done that whole thing, talking to my mom. We have a weekly phone call. She lives, 2 states over. And I'm trying to multitask because I'm tired. It's the end of the day.
Right.
I'm talking to her and stuff, but I'm also checking my email and scrolling through whatever. I'm like, wait a second, I'm an asshole too. So there's a universality in the mundane.
Mm-hmm.
People say, maybe folks could relate to each other better if you could walk in someone's shoes. Well, you are literally putting people in this guy's shoes, or maybe his bare feet if he's at home.
Right.
So I think that there's profundity in the stuff that folks might just write off as quote unquote boring.
Sure.
One thing I want to say, Amir said collection of regular moments add up to something profound. And this is related to slow romance. And one of the reasons I'm trying to do the same thing using dialogue, because there are so many great things that people talk about in regular life that don't show up in the movies, right? So if you collect them in a certain way and present it to people, like Amir's done it more visually, half through dialogue, then it becomes this rich thing that people can tap into. I think one of the reasons I thought of Amir as the only person or the best person for the character I'm writing, the kind of movie I'm making is kind of like an Amir movie, but with my fantastic stuff mixed in, right? So when Amir reads the script, he'll be like, yeah, this is going to be super, super easy for me, or not, or he'll say it won't be. But one thing his movies does for me is it pulls you out of the sort of hypnotized daily routine of looking at Facebook, Twitter, and this other world we create in our heads, and it pulls me back into the real world where I live and the actual things I'm doing. So it is like meditation, like as he said, very much.
I want to ask about the observations, the POV stuff that you were doing with, I assume it's a GoPro mounted to your head or something.
Correct.
Was it on the top of your head, or did you have like goggles or something? Because it looked like it lined up just about perfectly with eye line. But
yeah.
How did you do it?
Well, we just worked on how that's gonna look and what the actual resolution is, and what there's difference on that particular GoPro. There's different fields of views. We picked the right one that kind of seemed that it was not too wide and kind of seemed like it would be a pretty good mimic of the actual POV. And if the film has two distinct looks that play within each other. There's the POV that has a certain look, a certain texture to it, and then the other stuff that is kind of the other eye that's looking in, and that has a different. It's the color science is similar. It just has a different aesthetic, different quality about it.
When Netflix starts giving me money, I'm gonna remake this movie using De Niro and Sharon Stone, but de-age them, and I'm gonna call it The Iranian Man or 106 Computers.
Oh man!
Yikes!
I'll cut Amir in on the action, of
One
course.
thing I want to ask, going back to that POV thing, because it's something that I picked up on. This is going to get kind of intimate and weird, but during the love scene with Des, the field of view, as you described it, there's a shot where he's facing her, which I'm glad that they did finally turn around and face each other, because when we first see them, it is, again, it's driving home. It's underscoring that theme of isolation, because he's taking her from behind. Like, she could be anybody. She could be a robot. But they finally do turn around and they're facing each other during their sex. I was going to call it lovemaking, but it's not that. Her face is towards the bottom half, and yet the pillows or the wall is kind of the upper half. It feels like it represents a real field of vision. Like I've
Right.
seen, I can look at something and be aware I'm focusing on something up here, but then down here I can also see it, but I'm not like blinking back and forth, paying attention to both.
Right.
It underscores the fact that he's not really looking at her, but he's
Yeah.
also not really looking at the wall. He's kind of like zoning out, and I've never seen zoning out portrayed on film before quite in that way. Was that deliberate? Was that a happy accident? How did you practice for lining up these shots before you actually rolled?
Yeah, I mean,
film?
that was part of the rehearsal period in terms of just getting, trying to get the eye lines right and seeing how that whole sequence would work. And then part of that was the intimacy of a sequence like that and where our general focus is as we're partaking in an act like that, as opposed to how that would normally look in a regular film, where everything is clearly defined and seen, and you can see exactly perfect lighting and all that. The cameras here are in the fucking pillow. They're into the hair. Just they're kind of obfuscated, but in the way that it would feel very natural. I mean, just feel like you're living in that moment, in that space.
Now,
Ian, I'm glad you discovered this movie, because maybe you can spread the word amongst the critical community about the amazing movies of Amir Motlagh. Amir, I think, has largely been overlooked because he didn't submit to festivals for a long time. Back in the day, festivals were much more difficult to get into. So hopefully you can spread the word about this movie and other movies by Amir.
Oh, definitely. And we're starting with this episode, which will go up on Tuesday. So you've got your deadline for finishing that script and getting it out.
Yeah. Tomorrow. But yeah, I always thought Amir was, even 10 years ago, Amir was a great talent.
Thank you.
But racism, I think, is a big deal. It's a big problem. I mean, one of the things that would have happened, I mean, far less talented white filmmakers, have made it. I mean, hugely. Not that you need to make it. I mean, being an indie experimental filmmaker is completely fine. So, but, it's also nice to make millions of dollars making, like whatever movie. What do you think, Amir? Is the scene getting better?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't have any comment on that. I just feel like, my question is, do you
go
think
ahead. Being Iranian Iranian American had some thing to do with being overlooked over the years?
I think no, and I'll tell you why. I really feel like it's a system that doesn't understand how wide of an array of talent and work is available, and also how to deal with things that they're not familiar with contextually. So how do you deal with a film like this when you are not sitting in a theater and somebody else has not already given you the thumbs up to through a gate and says, okay, this is a good enough to get on this platform. So, it already hits those criterias. Now, imagine this film goes into imagine it goes just to screeners to Sundance, but forget about Sundance. It's just, let's say, mom and pop film festival in where was that place where I took a picture of that sign where
Wheaton, Maryland.
Okay, yeah. I don't want to say it about Wheaton, but wherever, Bakersfield, California. Now, there's junior programmers, they're in college or whatever. They just started and they love, fucking Batman or whatever. But they're doing pre-screeners for this film festival because there's thousands of tapes coming in they got to watch. And they have to sit and watch a certain amount of time with this film. Now, if you pop it in and you watch this for 2 minutes, you're going to pop it out. You don't have context. You don't know who I am. You've never seen any of my work. You don't understand where it's coming from. there is a lot of other filmmakers too that are very famous. And if no one knew their work and they had a certain film of theirs out that had experimental aspects about it or whatever, it would get the same treatment. So the system is problematic. But regardless of that, I still have found a way to make work. And that,
Sure.
to me, that's essentially just the most important thing, because this film, the other few films I did it within the same series. There was 3 films that I did within the same series of this. They were vital for me, and they were reactions to the fact that, I had another mainstream film that took 2 years. We had X amount of funding on, and then it fell through. So, $1 million film, whatever, and that screenplay, I still love that screenplay. I hope it goes one day, but that kind of sunk my feeling. Like, all the work, more than 2 years, almost 3 years, everything was going good. It was going to get, we're going to go into production, and then one financer dropped out. And once that happened, I had decided that, these are the other films I want to make, and I'm going to take a few years, 2-3 years, and just go ahead and do that and not worry about the other stuff. And so that's where Man came from. That's where Canyon. That's where 3 Worlds. All of those came within the same period of time.
Have you heard about 3 Worlds, Ian? It's a sci-fi movie that Amir made that goes with this.
I think you mentioned it the last time we talked, and I haven't watched it yet, but I definitely have to remedy that.
It's a different kind of a movie. I think David Fowley liked it. I liked it, but it's not slow cinema. It's not simple. It's like multi-layered, but very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I what I've done with these kind of films is taken a different approach each time around, and the whole thing, format-wise, how to approach a film, how to approach the plot, and so it's definitely a completely different film than this. Though you do sense that it is the same filmmaker making the work.
If we get Slow Romance done with Amir, maybe in Chicago we can do those 3 movies plus Slow Romance, a big Amir festival.
Well, what strikes me is.
Oh, can I say one thing about?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
We're talking about. The reason I mentioned the historical racism in the film industry is we have, as far as I know, no indie filmmakers or even mainstream filmmakers in the U.S. that are from an Iranian background, except for Kaveh Zahedi. He's kind of underground. Am I right, Amir?
No, I think there's several. Yeah, I think there is a few out right now.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I always just like to see more.
I mean, it's definitely the numbers are low, but there is.
Okay, good. I mean, and the flip side is, like, for filmmakers who are listening from a minority background or female, you can still make work, as Amir does and I do and lots of other people do. It's just it may be tougher to break into Hollywood, but now you can make work. You can get it out. You can get on some podcast. You can you can still build a fan base.
Well, I think, and this is a much deeper conversation, but I mean, I would question, if there is not, a representation from, race X, that's prevalent in the landscape. One of my questions would be, are they, how many people from that, nationality or whatever are actively trying to break into Hollywood? If they are, but I guess my question is, you're talking about people making, indie film scene movies and all that stuff. That is a particular kind of language and I guess culture that are making movies that are, important and really personal and speak to people, and that's great. But are they also trying to make Iron Man 5?
Well, it's connected. If you see Spike Lee making it in Hollywood, meaning Hollywood distributes Spike Lee stuff, more African-American filmmakers would try to get into Hollywood. If you see no Iranian-American filmmakers in Hollywood, Iranian-American artists coming up will assume to some degree this is a very tough, avenue for us. But
it's also tough for everybody. I mean, that's the thing. You're talking about the apex of entertainment.
I'm not sure if it's tough for everyone. I mean, this is not even subjective reality. We're talking about, 100 years. Most filmmakers in America have been white male. I mean, 90% plus. So, by that standard, yeah, if you're a white male, the possibility of you getting to direct a Hollywood project goes up way higher.
I think the landscape is definitely changing. Things are definitely getting better, right?
Yeah.
But I'm just saying it's not necessarily all about race. The numbers are there, right?
Yeah.
Historically, but I'm saying if you're just, if you're a white, young, independent filmmaker, I don't know that your chances are any worse than if you're a young Iranian filmmaker necessarily. In fact, with all this talk about diversity and inclusion and trying to get more representation in the room, I would think that being a minority filmmaker is a better story to open up, those kinds of avenues for you. And this is all speculation. Yes.
Yeah. Now.
But we can only deal with now, right? We can't tackle the injustices of 1970.
But the present situation is built on the past. So if we had, Spike Lee said this himself. He said that black filmmaking, he said this in the 90s. He said black filmmaking is just getting started because of him and other people, right? He says they are ways away from getting Romare Bearden. He's a African American painter. He did very interesting, unique things. He said, and Spike Lee makes even now he makes political dramas, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said we are ways away from getting abstract, super creative black filmmakers because the history is not there for a Spike Jonze, for a black Spike Jonze or a black Jim Jarmusch to come up. So, this is an entirely different, long conversation. But yeah,
I think
the 100
we should have it.
I
like where this is going.
Yeah, the 100 years of exclusion of minority and female filmmakers does matter as to who the money makers, and this could also be minority investors and minority studio heads. Like the guy who approved Star Wars was black. He was, there's a story about it that I posted, but he saw that there's a commercial, this is a white cast, sci-fi, there's a very commercial aspect to it. So he bet on it and he won. So while there's no clear proof that X kind of people will make it, when we look back on history, we know that African American filmmakers were excluded from Hollywood until Spike Lee. There was a couple more until Spike Lee broke through. Then it was shown that it is commercial. Then it was only until like 2 years ago where we had Black Panther, and even at that point, people were like, "Oh, that's the one-off." Black films can't make money, but that became one of the really really good money-making projects.
Sure, but I remember that narrative about Black Panther, but you also had Blade, which was 20 years before that. So again,
but Blade didn't make money though.
Blade made a lot of money. They had 2 sequels based on that thing.
Blade made $1 billion. Black Panther money.
No, but comic book movies back in the late 90s weren't comic book movies of 2018. So it's a completely different ballgame. But let's talk about it another time. I think that's a show topic for a future installment for sure.
Yeah, here I'll just put my 2 cents in this little thing to wrap it up. A lot of this is about access, and regardless of race, access is the big point. So I think if real change wants to happen in the space, it's incumbent on still the gatekeeping community to try to find the voices that are hiding in the crevices. Someone has to do that work aside from the filmmakers who are generally going to do that, but it's exhausting. It does get exhausting. And so if there is enough of that, of people kind of looking for different voices and being open to media that feels a little different but is still vital, that's going to open a lot more doors for a lot more people.
And with the tech available now, minority filmmakers can definitely, and female filmmakers can definitely make and distribute movies, create a brand, create a following. Some people are already doing it. So the future does look much brighter than the past 100 years.
Yeah. Now, actually, Amir, one thing that that reminded me of that I was going to make a point earlier, and this will be kind of the last point so we can wrap up. But what you were talking about, the kids programming film festivals, I was reminded of a ghost story, which came out a few years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
David Lowery.
Oh yeah, David Lowery.
That's definitely slow cinema,
Yeah.
and that got all, it didn't do that well financially, but it did
Sure.
get a lot of critical acclaim. And I feel like a movie like Man is very much in that same vein, where if I can sit and watch Rooney Mara eat a pie for 5 minutes
Right.
of screen time, I can watch someone, do their dishes and get into arguments on the phone, for 90, or I guess 80. So I just wonder, these changing tastes, if Ghost Story were to spawn something else, like imagine if Man were remade, or as Sujewa suggested, picked up by Netflix and remade. I mean, I can imagine you cast Scarlett Johansson in the role of Des,
Yes.
and you get Adam Driver to be Man, just like his disembodied voice, except for the shot at the end. You could sell this to people, and you get enough people saying, "Oh, this is bold, this is daring, this is the future. Look at this amazing performance."
Sure.
Not to say Rachel didn't give an amazing performance. So I'm talking about, you get that prestige pedestal thing going on. I just feel like this is something that could ride a current that we may be starting to see in terms of things that are more experimental.
Right.
Well, it's on the Slowdown, so it's already breaking through. Once you make it to Slowdown podcast, you're going places.
That's very true. And where we are going is to wrap this up. So thank you very much, guys.
Thanks.
Amir, congratulations on a film that is now 2 years old that I'm just now discovering. I hope to see more from you in the near future, because I've only seen one of your films really, but I can tell that you've got a voice that's very empathic and important, and it's a creative and beautiful as hell movie. So thank you for inviting me to watch it. Yeah,
absolutely.
Dean, thanks a lot for doing the show and paying attention to slow cinema, minority filmmakers, and unknown filmmakers.
I do my best. So thanks again, guys. Get me that script, and I want to see you. I want to see you on camera again in a month or so, Amir.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Good night, guys.
Appreciate it, guys. Bye-bye.